Hello, everyone. I'm Reverend Will Bouvel from Church of the Holy Comforter, and I'm here with Father Chris Hardman. Together at Holy Comforter, it's been inspiring for me to get to learn so much from Father Chris about Celtic spirituality and about creation spirituality. Even though I was aware of some of these things, like from seminary, I didn't get nearly in the depth that I have by knowing Father Chris and with the real commitment that Holy Comforter has had for many years to this subject matter. We're excited to begin a series of looking into these things in depth. And to get things started, I wanted to have a little time with Father Chris because I actually don't know all of the things that happened before I came here to Holy Comforter. And I was wondering if you could help us join in the journey that you've been on in this place around these issues. Where did it begin?
I think it probably began in college. I started out in the business school at the University of Arkansas and found that I didn't like business and so moved to arts and sciences, and I majored in geology and really loved it. When I got through college, though, I decided that my wife and I had already gotten married, and we moved back to Helena, Arkansas, my hometown, and I started in the family business, basically. But I didn't give up my inquisitiveness about geology and paleontology, and my favorite was natural history and how that all came to be and so forth. And so I kept reading articles in scientific magazines about that. And in 1972, in an article by Niles Eldredge and Stephen Jay Gould, they proposed a mechanism for evolution, and it was called punctuated equilibrium. And what they would say is that everything would kind of be in an equilibrium for a while, where everything was going just the same way. The animals were interrelating, the plants were like that, everything was the same. And then something would come to interrupt that. Could be a comet or a meteorite, it could be earthquakes, it could be a climate change, lots of different things, where one of the species would become isolated. And then over a period of time would begin to develop and adapt to the new environment. And then when those barriers left, whatever they were, they would come back in and take over that particular environment and be the dominant species there because they had adapted so well. When I read that, the first thing I thought of was the Exodus story.
Huh.
And this was back when I didn't know much of anything as far as biblical things. Grew up in the First Baptist Church, so I knew a lot of stories in the Bible. I didn't know what they really meant. But I thought about this story, and I said, it sounds like that Exodus story. I mean, they were 400 years enslaved. Everything was in equilibrium. Wasn't good for them, but it was in equilibrium. And then Moses and the plagues come along and mess things up. And then they are freed, and they become a new community, and they travel around in the desert for 40 years trying to learn how to do that. And I saw that as the adaptive part. And then they go into the promised land, and they begin to take over the promised land. I said, that's the pattern that you see in the Bible everywhere. Now, I didn't know at that time, what to do with that other than to see that connection. I eventually went to seminary. I was in my 30s when I went, and I had felt the calls when I was a teenager, but didn't really respond to it until then because I didn't see myself as a Baptist preacher. So I went to Virginia Seminary with a kind of wanting to know more about an understanding of who God is, and especially things like the Trinity and how does that work, and this whole thing about the whole biblical story and how that goes. And I really didn't. I learned a lot of basics there, but I really didn't get any real knowledge until 1995, which was 10 years after seminary. I went to a Canoga Episcopal Retreat Center, and it was a Christian education retreat, and the Reverend Herbert O'Driscoll was the leader of that, who I had known from a couple of books that he had written, and was really interested in hearing it. And in that week, he would introduce a new subject each week, and those subjects were the subjects that I have been looking for all my life. And they're the ones that I have been studying ever since. And they are things, the first one was the Paschal Mystery. That caught my attention. I said, I know about that. That's the evolutionary process, you know. And then he talked about the new science, quantum physics, and how that had changed things, that we began to see that we are really in relationship with everybody, and everything is in relationship with everything else. And then we talked about this movement from knowing God, knowing about God, to knowing God. You know, most of our time before that was knowing about who God was and what the rules were and so forth, but not really an experience of God. And so that's another thing that's happening at this point. So that there was this, it really, he began to see the Bible in a metaphorical way, and really told the story of the Exodus just as the way I had imagined it, you know, in this sense of you know, the way Rohr would put it, order, disorder, and reorder at a higher level. You know, he went through the whole story, and it was hilarious the way he explained it. But it was so moving that I knew there's something there. And then after that, those subjects became my subject. I began reading a lot of scientific books on quantum physics, and I began to read about practices of knowing God, and I became a spiritual director, which helped me get into that literature. And I read many physics books, you know, trying to learn that with a lot of people who had taken the physics and adapted them to the religion, and how that had made a difference with them. Then I guess probably that spiritual direction course led me to Ronald Rollhauser, one of the books called Holy Longing, which has a whole chapter on the Paschal Mystery and how we understand that. And then Richard Rohr, about the same time, came out with his wisdom pattern, the, you know, order, disorder, and reorder at a different level. So that got me together. And then I took a whole series on the Trinity, trying to understand how God is relationship, not an object in the universe somewhere. That it's really, God is love, God is the relationships that bring us together and to bring us and to hold us together. So it's been a long journey, and a lot of it I attribute to my time here at Holy Comforter, because I was kind of put in charge of adult education, and so I spent much of my time developing those themes. We did a series called Real Spirituality, where we used movies, and if you go to a movie, you can always pick out the Paschal Mystery in it. They're always there, but there are lots of other themes, you know, Trinitarian themes, communal themes, that really help you to embody what this kind of spirituality is about. And it's really about getting in touch with creation, being a part of the world that's around us, not thinking about how we for so many years thought about the only real life is the heavenly life after you die. You know, it's not that. It starts right here. Heaven starts right here as we begin to live in this relationship of love that God calls us to be a part of. And I guess that's the story. And I've tried to teach that in many ways here. And that led me to the Celtic tradition, which is about that. Creation spirituality is very much who they are. And then it got me in touch with the universal Christ. First read Matthew Fox's Cosmic Christ and his book on original blessing. That was back, those came out in the 80s, and about the time I went to seminary, and I didn't really understand them at that point. But in 2010 and 12, when I was here, we began to study those in classes, and then shortly after that, Richard Rohr came out with his The Divine Dance and Universal Christ and so forth, which we also studied. So it's kind of been one of those things where it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that in different times and places. And but I appreciated my time here when I could really, focus in on those things that have always been interesting to me, or how to try to pull things together. And the mystic tradition, which is a part of the creation spirituality, really brings everything together for me. It's like when you say God is love, that makes all the difference in the world. Because you begin to see that, well, you have love in you, so I'm made in that image. That needs to come out more, or I need to recognize that more.
This is so exciting that we're gonna get to the chance to have more of these conversations, because I'm learning so much already. And one of the key things, I think, when I came and started to encounter this, is that some of the words like cosmic can have a really new agey kind of a vibe. But actually, what I've discovered through you and through some of the books you've directed me to was that these are ancient and deep traditions, with writers who I had heard about but never really had the time to dive into. And so recognizing our deep traditions, many of which have been actively removed from the education we've received and the formation we've received, has been so illuminating to recognize that if you've become tired of sort of the tropes of Christianity that we have around us, well, there were other people who were tired of it too, and who had different ideas. And there's been a great conversation of different ways of approaching even the Paschal Mystery and expressing it. And we've only inherited, and I think in our general Christianity, only inherited a single strand. But there's so much more, and you've been able to bring that out. I'm looking forward to these conversations to bring out more of those things and to unpack why they're so exciting. And I think they have so much influence for how we connect to the world around us and the heaven around us here, not just something that is to come.
Right. Exactly right.
Well, I can't wait to learn more and to have more of these conversations with you. Hope you can join us for this journey and be part of watching these videos with us. And I can't wait.
Great.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thank you.